There's a specific kind of bewildered stillness that descends when American certainty meets British history, and the history doesn't budge. It's not an argumentative silence, not a vacuum of sound waiting to be filled. It's a dense, loaded, quiet, the audible record of a worldview, traveling at high velocity, encountering an immovable object made of centuries' tradition and a profoundly different relationship with the past. This friction is not merely about getting facts wrong. It's about two entire philosophies of existence colliding in a train carriage, a museum hall or a humble pub, with one side armed with boundless, optimistic confidence and the other fortified by layers of irony, understatement, and the quiet, unshakable weight of continuity. I witnessed a pristine example in the hushed atmosphere of the British Library's reading room. An American postgraduate student, his energy electric with transatlantic assurance, leaned across a polished oak desk toward a venerable archivist whose very posture suggested he was made of parchment and patience. "Let's be real here," the student began, his gesture sweeping across leather-bound folios and illuminated manuscripts as if they were Shakespeare, right? He was essentially the proto-Hollywood screenwriter, a genius of narrative structure and crowd-pleasing drama. He just lacked the studio system and the special effects budget. The archivist performed a slow, deliberate ritual. He removed his wire-rimmed spectacles, polished them with a cloth pulled from his waistcoat, and perched them back on his nose. Each movement was a sentence. "He departed this life," the archivist stated, his voice a dry, precise instrument, "approximately 300 years before the Lumiere brothers first projected a moving image." The student's face lit up with triumph, as if the archivist had just handed him the final piece of his brilliant puzzle. "Exactly. That's precisely my point. The man was an absolute visionary. He didn't just write plays, he predicted the entire three-act cinematic structure. He wasn't attempting a joke or engaging in playful hyperbole. He genuinely believed he had unveiled a profound, overlooked historical truth, a secret unlocked not through research, but through the sheer, unstoppable force of confident reinterpretation." The archivist offered a weary, polite smile that contained multisutsa, smile that was a library of unspoken corrections. This dynamic repeats itself across the United Kingdom, a comedy of manners played out with one participant, often unaware they're in a comedy. In a traditional Manchester pub, dark wood soaked with generations of conversation, a man from Colorado was presented with a pint of cask ale. He lifted the glass, scrutinized the amber liquid, and set it down with a decisive tap. "Can I get a cold one? This is room temperature, ambient." The bartender, a man who had pulled 10,000 such pints, continued polishing a glass with a focused, almost monastic rhythm. "It's cellar temperature, sir. 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Precisely. That's how the flavor is meant to be experienced." The American looked genuinely concerned, as if witnessing a public health oversight. "You all drink it? Warm." "We drink it," the bartender replied, meeting his gaze at the temperature of flavor. The tourist, surrendering to necessity, took a cautious, skeptical sip. His expression remained dubious. "You know, a little refrigeration could really elevate this concept. Budweiser figured that out decades ago." At that moment, a collective, nearly imperceptible sigh seemed to pass through the entire room, a silent, communal mourning for the very concept of subtlety, a shared lament for taste buds subjected to a lifetime of frosty blandness. The entrepreneurial spirit, unleashed upon ancient institutions, provides another rich vein of misunderstanding. On the Grand Mall leading to Buckingham Palace, a tourist outlined a business strategy to his companion. "They're sitting on a gold mine here and don't even see it. Royalty subscriptions, tiered membership. Pay, say, 20 quid a month, you get a digital crown filter for your socials, early access alerts for balcony appearances, maybe a monthly newsletter from a minor royal thoughts from the palace windowsill." His friend shook his head. "That's not how a constitutional monarchy functions. It's a symbol of state, not a SaaS platform. Everything functions better with a subscription model," the man insisted, his faith in digital solutions absolute. A British woman walking her spaniel nearby murmured to her companion, just loud enough to carry, "Some things, one hopes, remain beyond price." He overheard and called back, cheerfully dismissing the very notion. "Nothing's priceless if the branding is distinctive enough. That's marketing one." This reveals the fascinating, recurring pattern. In these transatlantic collisions, unshakable certainty functions as cultural armor. The objective is not necessarily factual accuracy or historical fidelity. The goal is to maintain a stance of authority, of interpretive dominance, within a foreign and sometimes baffling landscape. American social and professional culture often actively rewards the pitch. The bold assertion, the confident self-person who speaks first and loudest, often sets the terms. British culture, by stark contrast, has meticulously polished understatement, implication, and wielded irony into high social art forms. One culture tends to value declarative statements. The other culture treasures the perfectly timed, devastatingly polite, and semantically layered rebuttal. Combine them, and you produce spontaneous masterclasses in magnificent, often cheerful, mutual misunderstanding. The impulse to correct, to improve upon the inherited, knows no bounds. In a wood-paneled Edinburgh University common room, a student from Illinois offered his Scottish tutor some unsolicited, efficiency-focused feedback. Your spelling conventions have to create such massive overhead, all those surplus U's tossed into color and flavor and honor. Just think of the aggregate ink savings over a century. The environmental impact. His tutor, a man who could trace his academic lineage back to the Enlightenment, offered a smile so thin it could slice parchment. We invented the movable type printing press. Lad, we rather had ink to spare. The student paused, his mental gears audibly grinding, unsure whether he had just been flattered for his forward thinking or gently declared an enemy of the entire literary tradition. At a venerable London tea house, all china cups and linen napkins, a man offered the server some technological advice. You should really consider switching to a Bach brew system. This individual pot method is so ... artisanal, medieval. Even the server, her demeanor one of preternatural, saintly calm, replied, "We have been steeping tea in this manner, sir, since the 17th century." He shrugged, a gesture of friendly bafflement at such stubbornness. "And is the time for an efficiency review, surely?" She leaned forward a mere inch, her voice dropping to a tone that was both honeyed and carried the sharpness of a surgical scalpel. One cannot truly optimize what one has not first comprehended. Then there was the visitor to the Roman baths in the city of Bath, the steaming green water with the analytical eye of a lifestyle brand consultant. You could really leverage this asset more effectively. Rebrand it. Ancient British Wellness Springs. Lean into the holistic angle. Some subtle mood lighting in the alcoves, perhaps a cold-pressed juice bar by the exit. The guide, well-versed in Aquisulis and the habits of long-dead Romans, explained that the complex was built nearly 2,000 years ago. She nodded, visibly impressed. Wow, 2,000 years of operational history. And still no wireless charging stations in the waiting area. That's a tangible missed opportunity for user engagement. Centuries of empire, Stoic philosophy, and intricate archaeology seem to evaporate, dissolving into a puddle of mundane marketing critique. The guide simply offered a slow, acknowledging nod. The geothermal steam, madam, has proven to be quite stimulating enough for 2 millennia. At the National Railway Museum in York, a couple from the Midwest stood before Stephenson's majestic rocket. "Why don't you guys have proper trains like Amtrak here?" the wife asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. A gentleman standing beside them, impeccably dressed and holding a folded copy of the Times, cleared his throat. "Because, my dear, we invented the railway," he said, his tone one of gentle, factual correction. He then reached out and tapped the locomotive's great spoked wheel with his umbrella. "This," he declared, "is the original prototype. The Eurotrain?" The husband considered this for a moment, then countered, "Yeah, I get that. But the American models are way more comfortable. Reclining seats, more legroom." The gentleman's smile was one of infinite, benign patience. "You are standing in the waiting room of history. Comfort, I'm afraid, is a rather recent invention. This gets to a core truth. British politeness and reserve are often misread, especially from an American perspective, as passivity or shyness. They are not. They are, in fact, a finely calibrated and deeply effective defensive arsenal. They are the social equivalent of a rapier, elegant, precise, and designed to land a pointed thrust with minimal apparent effort. This plays out in everyday exchanges. In an Oxford student flat, an American complained to his British roommate, "Your constant sarcasm is just inefficient communication. It's a data compression loss." If you have a point to make, just state it directly. It saves everyone time and cognitive load. His friend took a slow, deliberate sip of tea, allowing the point to hang in the air. "Where's the sport in that?" he finally replied. "Half the intellectual fun is watching people do the work to untangle it. It's a test, you see. The American blinked, processing, so, ... You're being ironic about the virtue of being direct." "Precisely," his friend said, the single word landing with the finality of a chess move. It was a philosophical checkmate the American didn't realize had occurred. Until long after the game was over, these moments unveil the deeper cultural machinery at work. British reserve, layered irony, and the strategic use of silence are not social weaknesses or indicators of a lack of conviction. They are subtle, powerful, and historically honed instruments of social navigation and intellectual jousting. A measured pause, a perfectly deployed a raised eyebrow over a teacup, these are tools often sharper and more cutting than any blunt, loud proclamation. American forthrightness, meanwhile, is frequently the product of a vast competitive system that explicitly rewards decisive assertion, quick thinking, and the ability to project certainty. When these two deeply ingrained social systems intersect, the conflict is rarely a simple battle of verifiable facts. It is a duel of rhythms, a clash of ingrained conversational algorithms. Consider the scene at the Tate Modern. A visitor stood before one of Turner's tumultuous, luminous seascapes. "It's nice," he announced to his companion, his voice carrying in the gallery's quiet. "But the color grading feels off. It needs more saturation, more pop. It's a bit muddy." A curator, seeming to materialize from the shadows, glided over. The artist was capturing a specific, transient quality of light over the North Sea. "It's rather the point." The man shook his head, the expert in his own domain. "I do professional Instagram edits for influencers. I know what engages a modern audience. This needs a filter, a dramatic one." The curator was silent for a long, pregnant beat. The quiet itself became a critique. "So did Turner," she finally said, her voice soft. "His filter was the particulate matter in the atmosphere, the very moisture in the air, and the limitations of human perception. A rather more complex algorithm." In a remote Cornwall village, a lost family in a rental car pulled over to ask a farmer for directions. "We're looking for the nearest target," the mother said brightly. The farmer leaned on his gate, chewing a stalk of grass as he pondered the cosmic oddity of the request. "We've a cube," he stated, as if revealing a fundamental law of the universe. "Is that like a local affiliate store?" the wife asked hopefully. "No," he said, his tone leaving no room for corporate synergy. "It's like reality." They drove off, likely adding British Village inexplicably lacks major retail to their travel notes, convinced they'd glimpsed a peculiarly obstinate form of commercial obscurity. This tension forms the beautiful, awkward, and endlessly generative core of the dynamic. The American drive to innovate, to optimize, to fix and improve and streamline collides with the British instinct to preserve, to understate, to defend tradition and continuity with a dry, unimpressed wit. It is rarely about ignorance. It is almost always about identity. It is the forward-thrusting, future-oriented, what could be meeting the deeply rooted. Past aware what has long been at a trendy Brighton seafront cafe, a wellness influencer attempted to create the deconstructed full English smoothie. Baked beans, a fried egg, a sausage, a tomato, and a mushroom went into a high-powered blender. The resulting beige concoction, which she gamely sipped through a reusable straw, made her gag violently. A local man at the next table, who had been watching the experiment with detached horror, offered a single dry observation. "We generally employ cutlery for that. Love." She wiped her mouth, defensive. "I was optimizing the macronutrient delivery. It's about efficiency." He shrugged, a movement that conveyed centuries of culinary judgment. Some things don't survive optimization. They just become gruel. In Cambridge, a tech entrepreneur boasted to the owner of a centuries-old tea room about his Quooker tap, instant boiling water. 30 seconds from thought to tea. It obliterates the waiting variable. She smiled serenely, arranging a delicate china cup on a saucer. "We've been waiting the requisite 5 minutes for a proper infusion for about 300 years. We have a name for that accumulated cultural practice. We call it civilization." He nodded, pretending to grasp a profundity that eluded him. then asked a follow-up that nearly caused a structural fault in the space-time continuum of the room. And if it goes cold before you finish, you just what? Nuke it in the microwave? Her hand, placing the teapot on the table, steadied itself with visible effort. That, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, is the precise manner in which diplomatic incidents are traditionally begun. This is the grand recurring theme. The restless universal will to improve everything meets the ancient, localized art of leaving well enough profoundly alone. The conflict finds perhaps its purest expression in the arena of trivia, where confidence clashes directly with established authority. At a weekly pub quiz in Bristol, an American team, riding a wave of enthusiasm, loudly contested an answer about the War of the Roses. Google says, "You're wrong," one of them declared, holding a phone aloft like a holy talisman. The quizmaster, who by day was a retired professor of medieval history, leaned into the microphone with weary patience. I wrote the question, chaps, undeterred. Certain their digital oracle trumped local expertise, they waved the glowing screen. Our source categorically disagrees. From the darkened back of the pub, a voice laden with communal exasperation called out, "Is your source in possession of a doctorate in 15th century English succession disputes, or is it just the internet again?" The resulting silence was thicker than the pub's ale, and far more instructive. What ultimately emerges from these countless daily clashes is something strangely profound and universally human. Raw confidence may fill a room with its sound, but quiet humility often travels farther and sees more. The instinct to proclaim, to assert, to redefine, meets the ancient art of the quiet, precise retort. Both sides are, in their own deeply cultural way, engaged in the same project, trying to prove that their way of seeing, organizing, and valuing the world is valid, sensible, and right. One side often attempts this with volume and velocity. The other attempts it with depth, history, and a lethal precision of language. And in the vast, fertile, and endlessly amusing space between the phrase, "this could be better," and the phrase, "it already was," we find the hilarious, poignant, deeply human truth of it all. We all, regardless of accent or origin, simply want to feel that our way of navigating reality makes sense, that our logic holds water, that our presence in a confusing world is justified and competent. Even if, sometimes, that noble pursuit leads us to be confidently, spectacularly, and wonderfully incorrect in a dimly lit foreign pub, while a nation of people slowly raise their eyebrows in a silent collective and profoundly eloquent judgment that speaks volumes without saying a word at all. If this exploration of cultural conversation and its frequent, fruitful collisions resonates with you, help the American storyteller continue this essential dialogue about the unspoken rules that guide us. Hit the like button and share your own stories of transatlantic misunderstanding, unexpected connection, or humbling correction in the comments below.